This unusual sport is a cousin of cliff diving and seems to be entirely for people who don't think throwing yourself off a cliff into water of an unknown depth containing unknown numbers of jagged rocks is quite dangerous enough. Involving less jumping from a height and more diving into tight caves which can barely accommodate scuba equipment, participants are at risk for sudden losses of visibility, which can separate them from their partners, and if they lose their partner, the chances are that they're going to run out of air. You might scoff, but cheerleading is by far and away more dangerous than any of the sports for which they cheer. There are an estimated 20,000 reported injuries from cheerleading every year, making it one of the most dangerous sports for participants, and the risk of broken bones and devastating spinal injuries are significantly higher than in many other sports. Is Hoi Fat, a little-known sport played in the village of Hinh Quan, Vietnam, a form of cricket, baseball, or hockey? It's hard to tell, but one thing's for sure. Hoi Fat is one of the most violent sports in the world. The point of the game is to get a small red ball to one side of the sand dunes of the Red River, but there don't seem to be any rules on how to do it, meaning that people knock lumps out of one another with massive wooden clubs. For every 6 successful summits of Everest, it is estimated that there is one death. High-altitude climbers must navigate both terrifying obstacles and the corpses of those who have died on previous expeditions. At such altitudes, you risk hypoxia, hypothermia, pneumonia, and even blindness due to excessive UV radiation at the peak. That's before you even consider that you might fall off. This rodeo sport is where a rider mounts a particularly sturdy bull and tries to stay on top while it tries to throw the rider to the ground. Once the bull has triumphed against its rodeo rider, there is a high probability of them being wounded or even the bull, which can often weigh up to 1,800 pounds, trampling the rider. Quite what people's fascination with bulls is, we may never know. But another bull-related sport known as the running of the bulls is a horrifying pastime, where people run away from enraged bulls, which have been let loose in a city's streets. The most famous encierro takes place annually in Pamplona, Spain, and the goal is to lure the bulls to the town's bull ring. The sport is open to anyone over the age of 18 and has seen 14 fatalities since 1910. There are more than 300 injuries every year, making it incredibly dangerous to take part in. Like heli-skiing, many of the world's most dangerous sports are really just extreme versions of existing ones. In this instance, surfing is taken to its maximum danger level as the participants are towed onto waves measuring up to 20 feet tall. While there is a risk of drowning and being pulled under and dashed on rocks by the current, these fanatics are willing to risk it all for a coveted crown of the most extreme surfer on Earth, with a $100,000 prize on offer for those able to ride a terrifying 100-foot wave. Passionate skiers and snowboarders know that the only way to access some of the most inaccessible trails on Earth is to get there by helicopter. They book up to a year in advance for the privilege of throwing themselves from a chopper onto the most dangerous. As if the helicopter trip and the leap onto the snow wasn't dangerous enough, these intrepid skiers also risk being stranded by sudden changes in weather conditions. While this is essentially just parachuting, base jumping is actually an acronym, meaning building, antenna, span, and earth jumping. Basically anything fixed to the ground and high enough for these extreme sports nuts to throw themselves from. Many jumpers take to throwing themselves from some of the highest towers in the world, all the while trying to open their parachutes as close to the ground as possible. Due to its inherent dangers, base jumping is illegal in many countries, including the USA, and can only be practiced at licensed events. There are few things more dangerous than playing in traffic, and that's what makes street luge probably the most dangerous sport. With participants lying on a board just an inch from the ground, they hurl themselves down hills, all the while gathering speed while dodging oncoming cars, which can barely see them. With no brakes and incredible concentration required just to stay alive, street luge is for only the most dedicated thrill seekers.